Thank you, Chairman Grassley, for organizing this hearing on this very important topic. Thanks to each of you for coming to talk to us about it today. The Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Despite this protection that we have in our Constitution, the testimony today and recent news reports indicate that due process is often ignored when it comes to civil asset forfeiture. While we all agree that crime should not pay, federal forfeiture laws have enabled and even in some cases incentivized law enforcement practices that have great potential to threaten our liberty. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of the FAIR Act, along with my colleague, Senator Rand Paul. I look forward to working with my fellow legislators to eliminate the profit incentive that forfeiture creates and to adopt procedures that have a greater capacity to protect our constitutional rights. Ms. Sheff, I wanted to ask you a few questions. The Department of Justice recently announced changes to its equitable sharing program, and you've described how exceptions to that policy still allow equitable sharing with the states. But what about the federal system? To what extent is the profit incentive a problem within the federal system itself? And do you think we need to reform the ability of federal agencies to keep the money and the property that they seize in civil asset forfeiture?
Yes, absolutely yes. Any reform that does not target that profit incentive at the federal level will be ineffective. That was the problem with the CAFR reform back in 2000, and that will continue to be a problem until it is addressed. It is what is driving and fueling the abuse that we see. Before 1985, proceeds from civil forfeitures went to a general fund where Congress had control over how that money was spent. But in 1985, the law was changed to create the Asset Forfeiture Fund, giving the Justice Department direct control, what Chairman Grassley referred to as that direct connection between forfeiture proceeds and how it's spent. And since that time, the funds have grown exponentially. In 1986, after the forfeiture fund was created, it was only $93.7 million in deposits. 20 years later, annual deposits regularly top over $1 billion. And the same is true with the Treasury Forfeiture Fund. It's not enough to simply end equitable sharing. Congress needs to reclaim its control and oversight over this unaccountable funding stream.
So you're talking about a very sharp departure, a very sharp shift that happened. You had pre-1985 and you had post-1985, and you saw roughly a tenfold increase.
Exactly.
Or more as a result of that change. That's fascinating. These things, I take it, you do not regard as coincidental.
No, I think there's a direct correlation. It's a financial incentive. People respond to incentives.
Now, many of the problematic forfeitures tend to arise in the context of structuring, and the Department of Justice and IRS have recently announced new policies regarding structuring forfeitures. Are these policies adequate in your opinion, and if not, what additional reforms do you think ought to be made?
No, again, these policy changes are not inadequate. Again, they could be reversible by the next commissioner or the next administration. They need to be codified. But even these policy changes contain loopholes for exceptional cases. For example, the IRS commissioner himself testified that those exceptional cases could include repeated instances. So we could have someone like Carol Hinders, again, still fall under that same trap. And to give you an idea of the scope of the problem, annual seizures have increased fivefold over the 8 years from 2005 to 2012. And at least 1/3 of those cases, there's no claim of any criminal activity besides a series of cash transactions under $10,000. And 80% of those structuring cases done by the IRS are civil, not criminal. So that is certainly something that needs to be addressed. In addition, those policy changes are not retroactive to pending cases, so people who have currently already had this injustice done to them have no recourse. And the heart of the problem really is to clarify the standard of intent that's required. To be guilty of a crime, a person has to have a guilty mind or a mens rea, and right now under current law, that is not there. The law needs to be changed to show that willfully evading the reporting requirements by structuring transactions is what is a felony.
Okay. My time's expired, but if we get another round, or if you have an opportunity in response to questions from my other colleagues, I want to talk to you more later if we get the chance about what we can do to undo the problem that you describe, in which people are effectively deemed guilty until proven innocent, and what we need to do to shift that burden of proof back around. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.